out of focus. Oh, gotta be. Why is that out of focus? Okay, I'm back. Where's a timer? I had one. There it is. Oh, the battery's dead? Alright. That's dead. Let me see. Clock. Oh, stopwatch. So, start. Hello, internet. And let's see what my delay is. Seconds. About 18 seconds. That's not bad. Reset alarm. Okay. So after some emergency printing, about 3 hours, I got a new one of these for the one I split out, and an extra one of these, which I'll throw in my spare parts box for now. I'll double check it when I put it together. I realized I didn't grease these bearings, so I thought I was done greasing. I am not. I got 4 more bearings to grease, so I'll get all the goop out for that. I'm going to set this aside for right now. That works. Okay, so let's start by swapping this part. For those that missed last night, I ham-fisted, over-tightened this screw and punched it right through the side. So, yeah, that was bad. So now I get to do it again. But I was able to get most everything else upgraded on the printer. I also got my electrical upgraded in the black enclosure, so that's done. So in theory, once I get this put together and finished, I can go put the printer back in the enclosure and start the long journey of calibration. Do not want to do that. So this is the new version. I broke it right there. That hole should look like that hole. Oh, it's different. I think I talked about this last night, but this side, not much changed. 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 This side, for whatever reason, they eliminated this slot. I don't know what that slot was for. Yeah, not a clue. But it's gone on this part. The boss might be slightly higher, but I don't think so. I think it's about the same. This side, they eliminated the slot through, but there's still the little groove from where it used to be. And the screw hole locations are basically the same. So, you know, it looks like they just sort of optimized the design to get rid of that slot. The other thing that could have changed is the rod pocket locations are about the same. So I really don't know what's different, other than that slot's gone. So I'm gonna clean off my bearings, get the goop off the ends. I already checked the bearings on the rods, so I think I just need to fill them full of schmoo, and they'll be good to go. So I'm just taking a Q-tip and sort of packing the grease best I can into the rows of ball bearings. I'm trying to fill the spaces between ball bearings with grease so it works its way into the mechanism, and then also greasing the lip seals on either end of the bearing just a little bit so they don't if there's no grease on the lip seals and no grease on the rod, those lip seals tend to, instead of smoothing, or they usually go like that, and if you're really dry, sometimes they'll catch and then roll under, and then that doubling of plastic will jam your bearing up. Then you got to work it back and forth, sort of free it up, hope you don't rip something, and then throw some more grease in it. So yeah, I think I got that one pretty well greased. Next one. So it doesn't take very much, just sort of a, you know, about that much grease. Some people go what I think is a little overboard and actually take these bearings, put them in a solvent like acetone, dissolve out all the quote shipping grease until the acetone or whatever solvent they're using runs clear, and then basically do what I'm doing and pack grease back into the balls. Some folks they'll fill the cavity in the bearing full and then take a rod on each side and use it to pressurize the grease to really get it down into the balls. That works really well. I have nothing bad to say about that, but it's kind of messy because you get grease everywhere, and it uses a lot more grease, which I don't have a lot of grease total, so, and it's kind of overkill. For the duty these guys are under, I think this is going to be sufficient. I mean, how many Prusa kits are out there where people have never greased the bearings at all? You know, so whatever little bit of shipping lube is in them is all they ever see. So that's why I'm not going super crazy. If this was something with a higher load or got a lot more use than what I do, it'd probably be worth going the extra mile. But this is not. So putting the bearings in, the end where the crack is open, there's a lip. You can't shove the bearing in that way. So you gotta shove them in from this side where it's closed. If you break this little bridge here, it's much easier to get the bearings in, but then it's also much easier for them to get out. So I try to get it in there without breaking that. All I do is I sort of start them. You can't see this, but I'm just going up against the edge of my bench, which is flat, and pushing the bearing straight in like that. Okay, get it down. Take a socket or something about the outside diameter of the bearing. Push the first one all the way down so it's flush on the bottom. And take another bearing, get it started the same way. Push it in until it's just flush, and then that's done. So that's that assembly, lubed and ready to go. So next up, I gotta put in, oh, that's the wrong nut. Take a standard nut, and it needs to go in that little pocket. This is always kind of it's not really a pain in the butt nut, but it's a little more pissy than most of the other fasteners in here. So you got to get it lined up. And getting it lined up and in there is just a little bit of, not really difficult. It just sort of flops around a little bit. But the hard part, or the difficult part, is getting it pressed all the way in so that the hole's lined up with the center of the thread. So there it is. And the reason for that is when this is printed, the roof of that pocket's unsupported, so the filament likes to droop down and get into a position that's blocking the nut. So there's the other nut, trapezoidal nut. I already inspected this last night. Yep, still good. Put him on. Now, are all my screws the same length? They are. Good. Put those two in. So I'm down to as tight as I can get them, just holding on to the shaft of the Allen wrench. So it's sort of my all-natural torque wrench. And then doing about a half turn more. A little less. So if you really crank these down, it'll distort the plastic, which will cause the center of the trapezoidal nut to squish in, which then will bind on the shafts going up and down. Good news is if you leave these two loose, they're right there out in the open. They're really easy to tighten up a little bit on the machine if something comes loose. So err to the loose side versus the tight side on those, definitely. Now it's time for the part that I destroyed. So first things first, I'm just going to just lightly thread a screw into the nut backwards just to give me a handle. So I can get that started like that. Tap it, tap, tap. Crooked. And there's no real good way to get those guys in, because the back side of this part's not flat. Oh, that works. So just pliers and smush it down. Make sure that's all the way in, because due to this cavity, if you try to pull it in from this side, you'll do the same thing I did and just break the piss out of the part. Next goes in is the bearing. These are shielded bearings, so in theory you could inject some grease into them, but realistically you can't. And again, very low forces on this compared to what the bearing probably can support, so not too worried. Okay, bolts through the bearing. So the finger torque wrench on the shaft doesn't work here because of the nylock. The nylon drags quite a bit. So I'll just carefully screw it in until it bottoms out. Ooh, I heard a crack. I'm going to stop there. So the head is just about flush. Yeah, I'm just going to stop right there. So the head's just about flush on this side. Double check that your bearing spins completely free. No resistance whatsoever. And that is that side. So I'm done with that pan for now. And what's next? I think I put the rods back in. So I'll start with this side. The rod with two bearings goes on the top, which is the side with the nut. And you want to push the rods in until the ender rod not only shows up in this little window, but it's all the way to the far side. So that's what these little windows are for. So you can see when you get your rod shoved all the way in. There you go. I'll set this back there, and I can get rid of these. I need to grease the other set of bearings that I forgot about. And I don't think I'm going to pull them. I think I'm going to do them in place. So here's my printer. So I also didn't grease these, so I got to do that quick. Set those like that. Probably should put a little bit of grease inside the trapezoidal nuts. Actually, I think instead of putting grease in them, I'm just going to take this Q-tip when I'm all done, and it's still coated in grease, and just sort of rub it around in there. So less filling it with grease and more just smearing grease around the internals. So since I'm not pulling these ones back out, I'm trying to get all the way down and in and grease the lip seal on the back end. So that's why you get to see just the back of my head for a while, because my eyeballs suck. Now there's people with much worse vision than I, but they're much worse than they used to be. So I have to get things really close to see the small details. I think that'll do it. So like I said, I'm just going to take this and do that number inside the trapezoidal nut. Just put some grease on the surface. Set that. And take this assembly, make sure both trapezoidal nuts are pointing the same way. Put the rods in. Ooh, those are tight. I'm not even close. That one's all the way in. That one's all the way in. So that should be done. Put the cap back on my tube of grease. And I'll go to, I'm going to stick my hand right in the grease. Go to this side. So you can sort of see all the junk out of the trapezoidal nuts. Now, I don't have a good way to clean those rods, so I think I'm gonna leave them be. They don't look very dirty. I mean, obviously they are because I picked stuff up on here. I'm just gonna go pitch this real quick. But I think anything I do is just going to make things worse rather than better. So this assembly goes on top of the trapezoidal nuts like so. And carefully start the threads. Bring it down until you can see the top edge. And get everything lined up like that. So now the key is to try and do both equal amount. So everything stays levelish, and bring it down just enough so I can get the extruder assembled without going completely insane. Okay, so that's in. Next, very carefully, put the guide rods in. Trying not to knock any of the balls out. Gravity should do most of the work if everything's good. Now, an interesting thing I just noticed, if I pop both these rods out, this whole assembly's tipped that way a little bit. So I think I have a bit of a twist. Same now. I think of a way I could or make sure these are flat, but there's not a flat surface on them. Next up goes the little top cap assembly. Start one screw. Start the other screw. Not to crack or split the parts like I have on so many others. Like that. Screw. Drop that screw on my bench, never to be seen again. Get that lined up. Slide smooth, happy with that. Next up is the whole extruder assembly. So I'm going to flip this around, push that out of the way, and grab this hot mess. So most of the cable wiring, cable bundle, whatever you want to call it, belt goes that way. This part of the bundle goes between the two rods, really. And then the last, the hot end and the thermistor goes below. Okay, so let me just get this secured in a minute. Give me a minute. Hurrah! Staple. I need to crank these down more, but for right now, I'm trying to show you what I'm doing. So these two bearings go in pockets up here, and the zip ties sort of hold the whole assembly while you do the final assembly. This bottom bearing goes in a pocket right in the middle of the bottom, just like so. And all this cabling can come out the back. So now I'm going to feed the belt, I think, and get the belt done. So before I do that, tighten these up as much as I can. That looks good. And then get the where the zip tie locks on all the way to the top, otherwise it'll interfere with the back piece when you put it on. So, I'm good to clip these now. So belt routing. So I already got, since this is a rebuild, my belt's already cut to length. At least the length the old parts needed. I'm going to feed it through this side first. Then it goes through a groove in the back of the print head. And then it goes through that side, around this motor pulley, back into here. Now I have the motor pulley as far that way as it'll go in the bracket. The adjuster screw is actually not even touching it. And I'm going to try and push. Ooh. These parts, you know, either my belt's stretched, which is totally possible, or these parts are slightly shorter dimensionally this way, because my belt's too long by one little segment. So I'm gonna guess it just stretched because it was brand spanking new when I put it in the first time. So what I did there was I took the belt, I can actually get one more out of that. Let me try and do that. So there I pulled the belt out. So I'm pre-tensioning and pushing the belt in. So I'm pushing the head this way since this side's attached and pulling the belt this way and then dropping it into a slot. So I still got there we go. And once it's in, you take a screwdriver and just push the belt as far back into that slot as humanly possible. And that should keep it from ever coming out. So I'm not going to tension or adjust the belt yet. I'll do that after I get the back assembled. Right now, these wires, since they're hanging off the bottom, they're really easy to snag and pull, which if you rip them out of the heater, it's all done. It means new heater or new thermistor, and I've put enough new parts into this for 1 week. So next up, I need the back. Somehow, unexpectedly, this little guide block was completely loose when I took my assembly apart, which for how much I tightened everything was really surprising. Let me put this back in. So the wires in the back here fit in a little, ooh, there you go, fit in a little groove and then come out along this black plastic nylon filament. The filament's just sort of a stiffener for the cable, so it moves the way they need it to when stuff bends. So I'm going to start with the extruder motor because it has one of the biggest connectors. Next, the IR sensor. Actually, the IR sensor connector is slightly bigger, so probably start with that. And then I think the rest of these are just 3-pinners, so it doesn't really matter. Oh, Super Pinda, that's a 4-pinner. So the only reason the order matters is the hole's only so big, and as you stuff more wires in it, it fills up, and it gets harder to put any more wires in it. And the Noctura fan, and finally the chunk of nylon. Now these two go under this plate, so don't have to worry about them at this point. Now the fun part. So all these have to fit in a little groove in the back of the hot end. And for the most part, they're not going to want to. especially when they're new. There is a bit of a groove in the back of the cover plate, so it's not perfectly all shoved all the way in. You can still get it together, but the more you can get back in those grooves, the easier of a time you're going to have of it. So do that. Start the center screw first. Make sure that bottom bearing is where he should be. Just giving him a little pinch on each side. Yep, he's there. Screw's kind of long. There. I'm going to put the top two screws in, because typically they just drop in and do their thing. Again, try not to over tighten and strip anything. Well, crack anything, I should say. So now the question is, are all my wires in the right spots? Oh, I might know why this was loose. Okay, that's why it was loose. It's actually up against the bottom bearing. What I really need to do is either stick a washer under the head of this bolt or shorten it. Because when I tighten that down, the head of, or the end of the bolt sticks through the nut, and right there's the bearing, so it pushes this whole assembly apart, which I definitely don't want to do. But now I'm just inspecting to see if I got any pinched wires, and it looks like no. I'm going to put the bottom screw in. So that explains why it was so loose, is because I couldn't tighten it anymore, not without damaging something. There's the bottom screw. Tighten up the middle screw. Bottom screw. Top screw. Screw. So that is that, other than this. So how am I gonna fix that? Let me see what I got for washers. That's an M3, which would be this container. I wonder if lock washers would fit down there. So what I'm trying to do is find a couple little washers, you know, fit on the bolt and fit down inside this printed part. Well, lock washers will do it. So I'm going to stick 2 lock washers on this bolt. My other option was just to cut the bolt down, but I'm thinking 2 lock washers will shorten this up just enough to not bind on the bearing. Ooh, 2 might be too many. Let's go to 1. Now let's try it. One seems to do the trick. Okay. One was the answer. So I just took up a little bit of length of the bolt to keep it from running into the bearing and distorting everything. The other option was take an angle grinder. Take a Dremel and just grind the end of the bolt down. Sort of lop off a couple, not even a couple, probably less than a millimeter. But washer works, and it's faster, cleaner, easier. So that is my solution. So now the fun part. So wrapping the cables. So you got your cloth loam. I'm just trying to look and see. So this end you can see, or I can see where the zip ties used to be. So this is the end that goes on first. There is a speedy way to do this, and I do not have that skill. So it's usually just sort of some shove and pray. Sort of work everything best I can into the loom, and then sort of tuck it around the corner. Spiral wrap is much easier, at least for me. Ooh, maybe that's the way you're supposed to do it. Oh, so what I did is I shoved it in with this side on top of that side, and then just went back in and pulled this side on top of the other one, and everything just dropped in. It's like, this is the way. Let's see if I can do it again. So I'm putting everything into one side of the loom. Apparently including the connectors, because length. Now that everything's under that side, I just sort of, like a giant zip tie, or zipper, flip one side over the other side, and then pull everything nice and tight. There. So the next ones is these guys. So this zips ties down there, these zip tie up from the bottom. I think I can put these up here first. So what I'm looking at underneath is I want to make sure that I got lots of slack on the thermistor wires. That was a mistake I made last time, so I didn't leave enough slack there for them. So getting any sort of little boots on the hot end, or trying to get the hot end apart, was difficult because those wires were so tight. So you don't want them so loose they drag, but I'm leaving about that much distance. So if this is the heat block, they come out, they loop around, and they come back in, and about that much is how much they loop out currently. And I'm trying to get everything up and into position. I did the zip tie wrong. I want the heads of the zip ties as close to the body as possible so it doesn't run into things. You don't want the zip ties down on the bottom because then they'll drag. I'm just double checking. Yep, that looks good. So I can snip that one. Do another one. These guys arranged the same way, so it lays nice and flat. And now that needs to go into this loom as well, which I always have issues getting that into the same. So this is the easy end. So once you get it down to the end, you can sort of wrangle it around and get it to go where it needs. So I'm trying to pick up the inner fabric lip, get these wires under it. And now we get to this end, which is where I always have trouble. Well, that's not too bad. That's not too bad at all. I may just go with that. Call it good. Now I'm trying to, so this stuff naturally likes to double, and I'm trying to triple it at this end, so when I zip tie it down, it stays nice and snug around that back port. So I'm going to do these from the opposite side, so their heads are on this side. Get that all the way up. Scrunch that down. Just make sure. So this head is the first thing that hits on that side, and it would be the same on this side. That head's the first one to hit. So I lose a little bit of travel just to the heads of these. I can't move this one down to the bottom because then it'd hit the bed or part. This one I could move up, but I'm not going to worry about the millimeter, maybe, of lost travel. I'm not, if I'm ever printing something where that millimeter makes a difference, I think that's time for me to either split the part or get a different printer. House when they announced the Super Pinda or the S Plus upgrades, some of the Q&A at the end, you know, everyone's asking about the XL, and they let it slip that the XL is not going to have a tool changer, which, you know, I don't know for 3D printing if tool changers are the thing or just sort of meh, but from a mechanical widget point of view, that sounds really cool. One sec. You know, anytime there's an extra little bit that flips around and picks up another bit repeatably and reliably is so cool to watch, because typically they can also do it pretty fast. Now, for printers, who knows, but industrial automation, they're really cool. So it doesn't say to, but I'm putting an extra zip tie right here. Not super tight, just slightly tight, just to keep the hot end cables from coming out of the bundle. Okay, so that's that. There's the end of my thing, and they say to twist the loom slightly. Okay. And then this whole mess, that goes into that hole right there. And this whole mess goes into this clamp. I think that fit on the first shot. I just remember fighting with this, trying to get this together the first time. So I'll take the small victories where I can find them. These are just a standard Allen wrench. Hobby. And all the way over there. Cool. Now I'm going to finish up the electrical wiring, which is not so much wiring as it is just plugging things in the right spot and packing them in there. But first, I need to go find the documentation. Some of them are pretty easy to figure out where they go because they only fit in one spot. Home. Is it under LCD assembly, maybe? Nope. E-axis assembly. Maybe way at the bottom. Wire it. Where is the electrical? Oh, there's a show motor button. Helps to get the full list of pages. Waiting for pictures to load. Found this section. I'm just waiting on pictures to load quick. Heat bed bundle. Power supply. Power supply. Extruder cable bundle. route the cables differently now. Look at that. X, Y, and Z. Lower row of the connector. Red goes towards me. Oh! Yeah, they totally have a new way of routing the cables in the box from when I put mine together. So I'm going to go with that because it looks really nice and neat. So, this is typically the way I see these boxes, or at least the ones that my friends have done. Just sort of a hot mess. So, what I saw in there was really interesting. That's number 2. This is number 1. Is they take these 2 cables, 2 goes towards the inside, and they actually run them up behind this set of cables. So just sort of give me a sec here. So it goes X, Y, Z, E. Got these tucked in behind, like so, up and around the X. Ooh, I got too much of that sticking through. Fix that quick. So this is the end of the nylon for the extruder axis. I had too much poking into the compartment. So there, I fixed that. Take the clamps back up. Back to this. All the way up and around like that. Under this cabling, and then a twist, and into their connectors. Ooh, just barely long enough. Do I got any slack anywhere I can pull? Not really. So I don't have quite enough slack to route these exactly the way they had them. So instead, I put them, I have the X go behind them. And then everything else in front of them. And now I have enough slack. X in, number 1, number to, let me double check that, make sure I didn't flip something. Number one goes to the outside. Yep, one's on the outside. It's not exactly how they show to do it. That is a bit neater. Plug my Y cable back in. If I can. In. Now this cabling can get pushed down into that little gap. Bit of an excess loop here. That'll be okay. Still a bit of a hot mess. One of the things I never noticed before is there's a zip tie holder right there. Black zip ties on black parts makes it hard to see. Okay. This connector, which is the IR sensor for the filament detector, goes into the bottom row of that orange guy, pin 1 towards me, or towards the outside of the box. Motor cable. Yep. And they say to sort of, oh, there's another zip tie holder. Ooh, and this is the last zip tie with the Pinda upgrade kit. They got that down to a minimalistic science. The goal here is this will route sort of like that. Next one is the Pinda probe, which plugs in, I think right there. Super Pinda. Okay. Super Pinda, get him out from underneath that. goes around the same way, plugs in right here. Okay. Mr. Fan, where's Mr. Fan plugged in? Green. And it's right below it. So, Mr. Fan again routes around the same way, plugs in right there, and the heat bed thermistor, or the hot end thermistor, get my terms right one of these days. Got it wound around the hot end power connections. Really? There. Also gets routed around the same way and plugs in right there. Okay, so let's go with this. So these go like that. Anybody else left? Hot end, which goes right there. That's not going to route. I don't think they'll have us routed around, will they? Oh, they do. That wire. Heat bed. Oh, perfect. I'm glad I didn't zip that zip tie all the way. And I screwed up. This is not the connector for that. That is the connector for that. This is the connection that goes in there. And they do have you take the extruder connector or heat bed wires and run them around the outside edge as well, which is kind of surprising. The reason it's surprising to me is there's high currents going through there, so lots of noise. The cable will generate lots of noise, and you have your analog signals running right next to it, which is usually not a great idea. But I guess you have them bundled together in here, so what's a few more inches? And also you get your stepper motors, which really are noisy electrically. Okay, so they say this one don't zip tie in. So I'm done with this zip tie. I'm not cranking these zip ties down. They're just kind of a little loosey-goosey. This one is a little too short to go straight. This is the heat bed. God, I have heat bed on the braid. Hot end. It goes right there. So I take all these except for the cooling fan. Cooling fan? The heat break fan. That's probably a better term. Go like that. So I'm tucking the wires as far up into this corner as I can. And just snug. And this just all sort of tucks down. I'm going to reroute this guy. Go underneath the power fail wire and around the hot end heater. Just tuck him in between these fuses. Yeah, that looks nice and neat. Now, the E-axis label I tried to save was lost. Yeah, this is quite a bit neater when you follow their directions. Cool. Time for a door. Started. I'm trying to get this. That works. So I got three connectors in this upper corner with nothing plugged in. Half of that connector and one connector in the middle there. So let me double check the picture. Oh, got a really nice picture. Wish I found that sooner. X-axis, Y-axis, Z-axis, E-axis, heater, power supply, heat bed, power fail, got that. Left hot end fan, front print fan, I guess that's the official names, filament sensor, LCD cables, super pinda. And then the connectors that aren't used are unlabeled, right smack dab in the middle, which I have nothing plugged in. Raspberry Pi header, so you can plug a Pi Zero on the back, but Pi Zeros aren't quite fast enough to keep up with the printer when it's printing. So recommended to use like Pi 3 on the outside. A 3A is almost ideal for using it on the outside because well, if you don't have wired Ethernet, you're just doing wireless, a 3A is my go-to. It gives you the Wi-Fi and one or two USB ports, I think one. And that's just what you need for this. And then the three connectors up in the corner are also not connected. And then there's a little 6-pin connector that's unlabeled. I think that's for reprogramming the processor. So, no connect, no connect, no connect, no connect. Pi on the back side, which I'm not using, so no connect and no connect. And then the top half of that's no connect. So with that, I can tip this up like this. Oh, double check. IR sensor red is towards me, towards the edge. So, yep. So that is all that. And now, I'm going to watch the belt on this pulley, make sure it tracks in the center. If it tries to run off to one side or the other, I got to move the position. It actually tracks pretty good, so I'm not going to change that. Next thing is tension, so I'm going to push this all the way this way. It's pretty floppy. So the tensioning screw is right back in the back. And first things first, I need to screw it in until it touches the stepper motor. There it goes. So now as I screw this screw, the whole motor assembly moves out this way. Ooh. I'm guessing that's good. Tighten these screws down, which tightens the belt even more slightly. Ooh, he's good and tight. Good and tight. Again, I'm watching my belt position in the pulley, and it's smack dab in the center on that end. So I'm like that. Do it again on this side. There's really no way to adjust this pulley. It is what it is. Yeah, but it's not walking back and forth on the pulley. And with that, I think it's done. I need to clean my print bed. That one's full of grease. That one's full of God knows what. So typically you do not need to alcohol directly on your hotbed. But since I've been touching this with my greasy hands, I just want to get any grease that was on my fingers that got transferred to the bed off of it. Okay, what are the next steps? Next steps, I'm going to go shove it back into the enclosure, hook up the power, see if all the magic smoke comes out. Hopefully not. Then run through all the self-calibration routines. Oh, I gotta set the pinda. Is that in the instructions? It is in the instructions, but is it in these instructions? Preflight checks. nozzle needs to just touch. Okay, and then a zip tie thickness above. So I need a chunk of zip tie, and I need to screw this all the way down. Come all the way over that way. This also is good for figuring out if I have any clearance issues with the cover for the heat bed. Okay, so I want a piece of paper. Just something to stick under. No, I don't have paper. So there I'm touching. What am I dragging on? There, I'm just barely not touching, so go uphill to this end. Center. Okay, so I'm centered-ish. The tip is right over the center of it. Actually, I'm going to slide this back so the pinda is just off center. And what I got to do now, make sure this screw is loose. Zip tie under the pinda sensor and push it down until it's pinching the pinda, or the zippy body of the zip tie in the bed, and tighten this screw back up. Ooh, I heard a crack. Time to stop. And that locks that in at hopefully the correct height. And now I'm going to lift everything up just a bit. Okay. Alcohol locked on this? A little bit. And once again, I stuck a nice greasy print right on the bed. Okay, so super pinda probe to tip. That height's been set and adjusted. I think I'm ready to go powered up and do those checks. Okay, yep, it's time to go do calibration. So self-test, XYZ, filament load, first layer. Before I do filament load and first layer, I'm going to do bed leveling, which is a script in the Octopi where I adjust all these guys and get this twist out of the bed. For that, I will need that Allen wrench. So it's going to use this point as 0 and then go around all these other points and tell me, okay, move this one up, move that one down. So I'll get this nice and flushed out. Then I'll go back to the Prusa guide and do the filament calibration. Yeah, I think that's my plan. This stuff is all nice and ploppy. So, turns out that on this side, the nozzle is off the bed. So, if I was going to do it again, I'd probably redo these zip ties and put them all on this side to get that, you know, gnat's ass of a... Yeah, I might do that. Let me see if I got some black zip ties. I'm pretty sure this came with extras. Yeah, I got some extras. So I have more travel this way than I have bed, and I have exactly enough on this side because things run into this. So I'm just going to go through, snip my freshly installed zip ties, and then try and see what I'm doing and reinstall them. I'm actually just going to put them straight up because that is guaranteed not to run into anything. Other than the upper frame, I don't think I can go that high. Yeah. So I'm going these zip ties to this side, and that'll gain me like a gnat's butt on this side. It's probably explicit in the instructions to do it this way, but I am not rereading the instructions entirely. I'm just sort of guessing as I go. Such is life. Yeah, that gained me. Yeah, now the print head can go all the way off this side of the heat bed, so definitely put all your zip tie heads to this side. And now the travel is basically exactly the width of that guy. And I'm not going to try the vertical travel, but the only place it hit is on this frame, which is right there, and I don't think that's going to be an issue. So I think that's good, that's good. Belts are tight. I think I'm going to call it here. I am going to go start putting tools away, get this plugged in, start the calibration, self-test, all that good stuff, and hopefully this will fix all my problems. If it doesn't, there'll probably be more, either another live stream of me swearing and taking it apart again, or I'll post on Twitters or something. Well, thanks everyone who followed along.